1780s proved its vitality in the United States history. The Connecticut Compromise was formed when the Articles of Confederation, ratified as the original United States governing document in 1781, proved an inadequate governmental structure. In 1787, delegates from each state came to the Constitutional Convention to adjust national reform. The outcome of this debate was the Connecticut Compromise, which then resulted in the creation of the United States Constitution. The Articles lacked the power to maintain a strong central government, as they could not regulate trade, levy taxes, or even draft soldiers. The Connecticut Compromise is also referred to as the Great Compromise or the Sherman Compromise. The agreement was between large and small states, as both types of states had opposing views on representation in the Constitution and legislature. The debate among the delegates led to the compromise, which created a two-chambered Congress system, as well as the House of Representatives. The agreement retained to the bicameral legislature, but the upper house had to modify its formation to accommodate two senators that represented each state. The deal reshaped the American government structure, as a balance was struck between the highly populated states and their demands, while also meeting the interests of the less populous states. On the 16th of July in 1787, the plan of the compromise created by Roger Sherman and Oliver Ellsworth was proposed. Sherman and Ellsworth were both delegates representing Connecticut in the Constitutional Convention. The plan established a two-house legislature and proposed a solution to the heated debate between the larger and smaller states over their representation in the newly suggested Senate. The larger states believed that representation should be based proportionally on a state's contribution to the national finances as well as defense, whereas the smaller states believed it only be fair with equal representation regardless of population and state size. The plan proposed by Sherman and Ellsworth provided a dual system incorporating both of the states' plans. The larger states' plans were demonstrated in the House of Representatives, as each state's number of seats would be proportional to the population, and in the Senate, the smaller states' plan was demonstrated as each state would have the same number of seats. The convention adopted the compromise by one-vote margin on the 16th of July in 1787. In 1723, when Sherman was but 2 years of age, his family moved from his birthplace of Newton, Massachusetts, to Dorchester, which is now known as Stoughton. Whilst young, he had a burning passion for reading during his spare time. This supplemented his minimal education from the common school. Although he desired to read as often as possible, most of his waking hours were spent helping his father with farming chores and learning the cobbler's trade. The cobbler's trade is a trade between the shoemaker and client, where the shoemaker makes footwear out of leather and trades for his benefit. In 1743, 2 years after his father's death, Sherman joined an elder brother who had settled in New Milford, Connecticut. In 1761, Sherman abandoned his law studies and moved to New Haven, Connecticut. There, he managed 2 catering stores. In 1763, 3 years after Elizabeth Hartwell, his spouse, died, he wed Rebecca Prescott, who bore 8 children. During this, Sherman's career in politics had grew. He rose from the county judge to the Connecticut Superior Court. Although opposed to extremism, he joined the fight against Great Britain. Sherman was an incredibly influential member of the Constitutional Congress. He won membership on the committees that drafted the Articles of Confederation as well as the Declaration of Independence. Sherman was active in both state and local politics. In 1784, he was elected the mayor of New Haven. Sherman represented Connecticut in the Constitutional Convention in 1787. Although he was believed to help draft the New Jersey Plan, he was a prime mover behind the Connecticut Compromise, which then broke the impasse between larger and smaller states over representation. Sherman's career ended with his service to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1789 through 1791 and Senate from 1791 to 1793. He died in New Haven at the age of 72 in the year of 1793, and he is buried in the Grove Street Cemetery. The Articles of Confederation were adopted by Congress in 1777. The document served as the very first constitution for the United States from 1781 to 1789. This occurred while the present-day Constitution went into effect. The Virginia Plan was the plan which was supported by larger states due to the resolution suggesting proportional representation, meaning if a state was more populous, it would send more representatives into legislature. The New Jersey Plan was supported by the smaller states, as the smaller states felt it to be unfair that they would have less say in government if the convention decided on the Virginia Plan. The New Jersey Plan had 11 resolutions, and it was drafted by the New Jersey delegate William Patterson, which was then proposed collectively by small state delegates. The New Jersey Plan included one house featuring equal representation, where every state had the same number of representatives. The two sides, large and small states, rejected each other's ideas for representation. They negotiated on the future of the United States government, unsure on how to proceed. This is when Roger Sherman proposed the idea of the compromise. The plan included a two legislative form of government, which were the Senate and the House of Representatives. For every 300,000 citizens, a state would receive one member to serve in the House of Representatives, along with two senators. This proposal was passed by one vote, despite Benjamin Franklin's efforts to block it. The Great Compromise has many key sections to it. Some include: members of the House should be appointed among the states based on population and should be elected directly by the people. In the Senate, each state, regardless of size, population, or wealth, should have 2 members. Senate should be chosen by the state legislators, and states would be equally represented in the Senate. The most significant effect of the compromise was the change in the government structure. The agreement focused on striking a balance between proportional and equal representation. The compromise achieved many things. Each state would split their delegates between representatives for the Senate and the House. The Electoral College and the presidential election formation was a result from the split between direct and indirect representation. Ultimately, the compromise kept the convention together and led to the bicameral Congress in the lower house, which is the House of Representatives, and each state has equal representation in the upper house, which is the Senate. The significance of the compromise in the United States history cannot be underestimated. The issue of representation threatened to destroy the convention. Luckily, the compromise resolved this. Some believe that since each state gets 2 senators, it is unfair to the larger, more populous states. They also disagree with the fact that only 1% of the workforce is actually part of the federal government, and even lesser part of Congress. Some prefer a strong form of federalism or confederalism. Many believe that both houses should be based on population. A quote said by Catherine Bowen states, "There are critics today who think that the convention erred, and that the Senate, like the House, should have remained proportional. Yet without the Great Compromise, it is hard to see how the federal convention could have proceeded further, since the beginning of it had been a cause for battle." Benjamin Franklin and James Madison both disagreed with the result of the convention, but understood that fighting the smaller states was pointless. Many believe that the smaller states are favored, but proportional representation in both houses was not going to get a new constitution written. In conclusion, the compromise drastically altered the convention's ideas on the legislature. Without Sherman and Ellsworth's hard work and perseverance, the deadlock between the larger and smaller states would have remained in place until the convention would have eventually been destroyed.